Tim Graham and Friends is brought to you by CTBK, CPAs and business consultants. CTBK is a leading accounting firm with a growing team of accountants and business consultants with roots in Amherst, New York. CTBK pairs every project with a focus on a human connection between its team and the client. For assurance, accounting, taxes, litigation support, and advice on mergers and acquisitions, CTBK is available and ready to solve any issue your business faces. For a consultation or to request a quote, call 716-630-2400. Again, that's 716-630-2400. CTBK, over a quarter century of proven accounting and business excellence for Western New York and beyond. Welcome to another edition of Tim Graham and Friends, brought to you by CTBK. I am Tim Graham of The Athletic, here with Matthew Fairburn of The Athletic and Jonah Bronstein of Bronstein and Associates. And we're going to have Matthew Gutierrez. He covers Syracuse for The Athletic. He's going to be joining us to talk about Syracuse basketball. He also covers golf, and we're going to touch on Tiger Woods' car accident and some coverage of that, and just what this means for golf, or just when something like this happens with a sporting icon. Matthew, before we get too far along, I would like to see where your thoughts are regarding J.J. Watt and the evolution of this story. I don't know, your feelings, the fact that it's gone on this long, is that to be expected? Especially when it comes to a superstar, all of these are individuals, so there's really no textbook on when a J.J. Watt's going to sign. But the fact that the Bills still very much seem to be in this mix based on reporting, or the fact that they haven't been eliminated, the floor is yours. What's up with what's the gist on J.J. Watt?
Yeah, I think it's somewhat to be expected in the sense that this is his first time experiencing free agency. And I think there's a feeling of wanting to take your time, wanting to maybe soak it in a little bit and, be courted and, take your time making a decision. We also don't know the exact final figure on the NFL salary cap. And so I think that plays a small role, not a huge role, but, you could be talking about the difference between 185 and 180 million. And that's a different picture for the Bills, or, quite a few other teams, that the Packers, another one that might be in the mix, that are sitting on that edge and may be willing to give them a few extra bucks. There's still, cap casualties around the league that are happening. J.J. Watt was the first, but there's others that could open up some more room for some of these teams. And I think there's not, the traditional guy hits the market, guy goes out to dinner with 3 or 4 teams and gets the real free agency treatment. It's more of a slow burning process because he doesn't really get to go through that. And there's still, I think so many teams are still figuring out so many financial situations. And I do think that's a piece here for JJ Watt, this idea that, I don't know his thinking. His camp is, put some stuff out there through various reporters, but I would assume he wants to get paid pretty well. I don't think the NFLPA would be happy if he just took a league minimum salary and, went along with his day. I think he should be paid close to his market value. And I don't even know that you can determine his market value without knowing the salary cap. So I think there's some of that, but I would think before free agency, this gets settled soon. They'll have a number on the cap. Teams will make their decisions. They'll plan everything out. Then you can see just how much JJ Watt can fit into your plans. But it's been a little bit of a weird story. The whole people love deciphering the tweets, and I don't know. There's only so much of that you can do, I feel like, before it gets a little bit old. But people are having fun with it. JJ Watt seems to be having fun with it, and I don't really blame him considering it's the first and probably only time. Well, maybe not only time, because who knows? But the first time he'll be a free agent, and the only time I would say he'll be this big of a free agent. He's got the whole stage to himself up until March 17th. Like, why not soak it in and just, take it for what it's all worth? And he certainly seems to be doing that.
If this were a normal year, we would all be in Indianapolis right now at the NFL scouting combine. And that is where front offices and agents really broker some heavy duty deals over a steak and a whiskey at the various restaurants that are out there. I recall seeing Ben Roethlisberger and Tom Condon walking through St. Elmo's, the steakhouse there, and probably to meet with the Steelers one off season. So Ben Roethlisberger he wasn't in the draft. He had already been in the NFL for years. So JJ Watt might be in Indianapolis in normal circumstances and meeting with all of these teams directly with his agents. And maybe that would, not maybe, but probably would speed up the process a little bit. Everything's done by Zoom now. It's probably so yeah, that
taking some of the charm away for
that
him,
could
right?
drag it out. Sure.
You get to be a free agent and you get, these great free agency dinners that are just like the stuff of legend. You hearing some stories about guys that get courted via free agency and the late nights they have, the coaches or front office guys trying to convince them. And that seems right up JJ Watt's alley, like, trying to figure out who he fits with, figure out who he clicks with. And you don't necessarily get that over a computer screen. I think you can get surface level, right? Like JJ Watt fits with Sean McDermott because hard work and process and X, Y, and Z. But, I don't know that that's always the case. There's various ways to be a hardworking process guy, and those guys don't always necessarily click. I'm not saying they don't, or these two wouldn't, but there's something that you miss by not having the in-person interaction of, whether it's going out to eat, getting the big steak, getting 4 or 5 whiskeys deep and deciding, getting to really know some people and seeing how you click on a certain level. So I think you got to be a little bit more methodical when you're doing that and kind of figure out, be patient, because there is absolutely no rush for JJ Watt. That's the thing. Some of these teams might want to figure it out. There's absolutely no rush for him because his market is his market. I don't think his market's going to collapse in on itself because I don't think it's massive to begin with. I think there's a subset of teams that fit his criteria. And if you're not one of those teams, you're probably not in on him. And so those teams aren't really going anywhere. Wait it out, see what's going on. See what the cap is, like I said, and just pick your spot from there as opposed to rushing into it. And I think the timeline will get accelerated in the coming weeks as we get closer to free agency because teams will turn their attention elsewhere at that point. Then you're saying, why do we have to sit around and wait for JJ Watt when all these other players are on the market and we can't sit around and wait forever? So I think good for JJ Watt. Drag it out, give people something to talk about, I guess. But I don't think the Bills desperately need JJ Watt. I think it'd be a nice piece.
It would be a nice story for us. It would give us something to talk about.
It'd be a great story for us, and an otherwise pretty quiet offseason to this point. The pretty stable offseason, not a lot of turnover.
Yeah, even during the Super Bowl years, there seemed to be coaching staff turnover, questions, of course.
There'll be some cuts here soon for
change in kicker. Scott Norwood's got to go. I mean, this is about as stable as you can get with the Bills organization. There's the coordinators are back, the coach is back, the GM's back. We know who the quarterback is. Did I say quarterback already? All the key parts are there. So
they'll have some cuts here soon. I would imagine, to clear some room, some restructures, some things like that. And yeah, they may add a JJ Watt, or maybe they add, a name that I don't think, fits that mold, and will be a topic of conversation potentially in March, would be Richard Sherman, also a free agent, one of those pieces they could add to the defense, at a potentially reasonable cost. So they'll have room for like a move or two, some of these, not necessarily a huge swing, but yeah, a JJ Watt or a Richard Sherman would really spice up this offseason for us folks trying to cover it.
And what do you make of, there's been a report that Matt Milano is going to test free agency. Is that what you expected, what we should have expected, or is that at all an indicator that he's not coming back?
Yeah, I think as the season wore on, that became my expectation, just based on patterns that we've seen. For one, Matt Milano switched agents, which is always kind of a thing in the back of my mind, that was, he had a different agent when, I don't know exactly when he switched agents, but I know he entered the league with one agent, and now he's repped by Joel Siegel, who's a pretty big deal. He represents some of the other Bills as well, some of their big name players. That was sort of a hint, in the back of my mind. And their pattern has been, for the most part, particularly with younger players, get those guys locked up before that final year. Like, once it gets to that final year and they play the whole thing out, all of a sudden this guy's a couple months from free agency. It's a lot more tempting to just say, hey, I'm going to go try to set the market at my position. And, he's a good player, but, you look at the Bills' financial situation, and they signaled loud and clear what was important to them. Deion Dawkins and Tre'Davious White were more important than Matt Milano, which I think is fair. I think it was the appropriate ordering on their part. And you can't keep everybody. Now, I think what they might be getting into a situation of is, are they deciding between Tremaine Edmonds and Matt Milano long term? Because if that's the case, that's a trickier conversation than the Deion Dawkins, Trey White stuff. So, yeah, I think anytime a young player gets to that point, you saw it last year with Jordan Phillips and Shaq Lawson, they get to that point, they've got a couple months, and there's always this. Brandon Beane does not negotiate through the media, quote unquote, but he's also not, super close to the vest either, because at the end of last season, he said, Quentin Spain's already expressed interest in coming back, and we're going to try, we can try to get something done. And he said, Jordan Phillips and Shaq Lawson, they had earned the right to test the market. That was at the end of the season in January, kind of a signal, like, yeah, we're going to, and then at the combine, they say, we're going to try to get something done, whatever. But once they've said that, I think, those players know what's what. And he said that same thing about Matt Milano. So, yeah, John Morrow had the report last week, and I would expect, unless they want to use the franchise tag, personally, I wouldn't. $15 million. I don't know. The guy isn't always healthy. I don't think he's as injury prone as necessarily he gets labeled, but I do think you saw last season that they can survive without him. They're a better team with him on the field, but $15 million is a lot of money for a cash-strapped team.
Speaking of a lot of money for the production, although it's not because he's hurt, it's because he's not producing. Jeff Skinner, is he going to get back in the lineup? Healthy scratch, 2 games. The Sabres win an easy one last night over the New Jersey Devils. I don't know, just to throw out there, Jeff Skinner. It's kind of hard to trade a guy who's been a healthy scratch too, or it makes it a little more difficult. Anything to say about Jeff Skinner?
Doesn't he have to get back in the lineup eventually because of what they're paying him, and they're not all that deep on, the bottom 6 or the 3rd and 4th lines to keep this guy as a scratch?
Sure. I was being facetious. I don't think they're going to go on a 20-game winning streak without him, but yeah, he's going to get back in there.
I think the question is, does benching him for 2 games stir anything up, get him to start producing, or do they figure out a new way to use him? And I don't know the answer to that.
My guess is no, because he didn't score at all last season either. I mean, it's not like he needed to be benched to say, oh, you know what? I guess I need to start scoring. I mean,
the
I don't know
fancy the fancy stats suggest that the chances haven't changed dramatically. You know, it's whether it's lack of finish or whether it's bad puck luck, whatever it may be. But he's also been getting jerked around in terms of the line that he's on, you know, and I think the bigger Sabres question to me, and of course, Jeff Skinner's a huge story, and the dollars that he's making and the way that he's played since that first season hasn't lived up to that contract. But at what point do you start asking the question about Ralph Krueger? Because we had the conversation the other day about the tendency in this town to be like, oh, you know, football is one thing and you know, bleeding football concepts into hockey. And it's like, oh, give them some time to turn this thing around. Well, the Canadians just fired their coach and they're playing well. You know, like that's how it works in hockey. It's like things happen quick, you know, and you know, that can be a big spark for a team. And they haven't been that good under Ralph Krueger. They've been pretty lousy, and they haven't really shown signs of dramatically improving.
He's a hell of a communicator, though.
Sure.
Do we know if Kevin Adams has the authority to fire Ralph Krueger?
Well,
I'm not so sure he does.
I think that's the bigger question when it comes to Ralph Krueger is, yeah, does Kevin Adams have the authority to fire him? Number one, and number two, you know, the words lean and efficient were used, you know, when they were talking about hiring Kevin Adams and redoing the hockey operations department and everything else. Are the Pagulas going to want to pay a coach who's not coaching for him? Probably not.
And I think
another coach. I mean, how many are they still paying?
Yeah, is Housley still getting paid? Probably. Maybe.
I've lost track of all those guys.
I think Dan Bylsma's probably off the books by now, but
yeah. So that's to me.
But I think a big part of them installing Kevin Adams as the general manager is that he has Ralph Krueger there, and Ralph Krueger, with all of his experience, whether it be in hockey or soccer or in the business world or whatever, that as a team, these guys have experience or they have the wherewithal to navigate. To get rid of Ralph Krueger now, you're pretty much leaving Kevin Adams naked.
Yeah.
They didn't hire a lot of experienced assistants around Kevin Adams. There's not a lot. This hasn't been buttressed at all. It's pretty much Kevin Adams might actually need Ralph Krueger.
And the idea has been kicked around of like, you know, kicking Ralph Krueger upstairs and hiring a coach or something, but I'm not sure what indication he's given that he's particularly sharp in that department either. So I don't know. You know, we had the conversation about Sabres Twitter yesterday, and I get it. You know, I get where they come from on a lot of this stuff because there's just, you want to see some spark, some signs, and they won last night, so they have their moments, and but there's some underlying, you know, troubling big questions that just seem to persist. And I think seeing the Montreal Canadiens fire their coach this morning was kind of like, oh, you know, and then, you know, what happens is, you know, those teams snatch up other coaches, and, you know, there's good coaches that get recycled around the league and they just sit out there sometimes, you know, not too long. And then they get snatched up by these teams that act quickly and fire their guys. And meanwhile, the Sabres hung on to Housley for a long time. And I think there's a tendency for people to go like,
some people say not long enough. John Murphy got suspended from his radio show for saying the Pagulas acted too rashly.
Right. So, and that's part of the football mentality bleeding into hockey too much is like, you need 3 years to build a program in football. You need 3-4 years, whatever. I don't know, like a little different in hockey with the coach. You know, the GM, maybe, you know, give him some time. President of hockey operations, perhaps, you know, which doesn't seem to be a thing here.
But this was a whole systemic thing too, based on Krueger. Let's get Krueger's system installed down there in Rochester. They got rid of a popular coach in Chris Taylor. And it's because it was different different philosophies. So let's go ahead. We need to. So now the Pegulas have kind of gone all in with Ralph Krueger.
And there could be a line of thinking of this year is really weird and unconventional, and they've already gotten a wrench thrown into their season that wasn't much fault or really any fault of their own. And so, maybe just write this one off as kind of a pass, but it's a hard sell to a fan base that has basically done that for a decade. This one is legitimately different. There's legitimate reasons to just say, well, this season, maybe just it's going to be random. Forget about it. Give them another shot next year. But that's a hard sell for not only a fan base that's done that time after time, but they went 9+ months without watching hockey at all, without watching their team play at all. And then you're going to tell them, well, that season wasn't worth it either. So what? They went 2+ months or 2+ years without seeing a legitimate hockey team,
Right.
and really longer than that, obviously, about a decade it's been. But yeah, it's growing increasingly difficult, and I'm very curious to see if they do manage to pull off a plan to get fans in the arena, how many they can even get.
Well, but do you think so? If they can only let 10% in, are they going to have trouble selling those 1,800 tickets? Because I think the pent-up demand, and especially for this season, lack of, lowered capacity reduces that pressure to excite the fan base and have tickets. People are just going to go to the games just because they can.
You're probably right. If it's 10%, if they can get closer to 50 or whatever by next season, is sort of what I'm thinking about, is like next fall, when they play another hockey season. This year, yeah, if it's 10%, man, if you can't get 1,800 people in the stands,
Right.
then you got bigger problems than I think. I think there's enough people you could probably get 1,800 people to go to a youth hockey game right now. People are so.
You would need 1,800 players, though, because you only get one fan per player.
Right. Yeah. Like, people are so excited to go to sports. I think you could get 1,800 people to do a lot of things right now. But yeah,
I think that really what needs to happen, if there are fans out there that really want to move on from Ralph Krueger and knock the Pegulas off any position of stability, or to keep, keeping things the way they are, you need to reinstitute the group howl. Get group howls going for all things that knock the Sabres further down in the standings, for opponents scoring goals, and let the Pegulas know that it's time to gut this organization again. Group howl it got it done before.
I was even thinking maybe they'll end up with a high pick again. And then I had almost totally forgot that they had a number 1 pick. You think of Eichel and Reinhart as that was the era when they were collecting the top picks, and it didn't totally work out, but they got some good players. And then I'm like, oh yeah, they also had another number 1 pick. How many do they need? Sully likes to point out the whole roster is practically top 10 picks. I don't know how many of those they need. It's the weird ground you get in sports, where it's like a team is bad, but you almost need to let something play out a little bit, to decide how bad or when to change. And it's just probably a pretty frustrating existence. But hey, the season's so random that if they rip off a 10-game winning streak, they've got a lot of the pieces that help to rip off that 10-game winning streak. That's a much bigger chunk of this season than any other. So random things can happen in hockey if their luck starts to change. So maybe we'll be having some different conversations on Tim Graham and Friends down the road.
Before we get to Matthew Gutierrez and talk about Syracuse hoops and also Tiger Woods, Jonah, got a big rivalry this weekend. The games, I guess they were rescheduled. I think they were. Canisius and Niagara are going to square off. And can you give us a little preview of these two teams? And it's a Big Four matchup in the Metro Atlantic, and actually two teams that are doing okay this year.
Yeah, I mean, Canisius is over 500. Niagara is a game under 500. Canisius had won 5 in a row before they lost against Fairfield on Saturday or Sunday last weekend. It was rescheduled. It was supposed to be played March 4th and 5th. Now it's being played both noon games, Friday and Saturday. It's always a big rivalry game, an exciting game, even when the teams aren't very good. Now there won't be any fans there, so it's a little bit different. And even the TV, it's ESPN Plus, ESPN3. Normally, Canisius Niagara is a game that at least once a year the MAC puts it on TV, one of those ESPNU games. That's not the case with these two games coming in. But, I'm looking forward to it because it's always a good way to gauge how good these two teams are when they play each other, I think. And Canisius has a series against Siena, who's the first place team in the MAC, coming up next weekend. This will be Niagara's last regular season games, probably before the tournament. Something could get rescheduled, but right now that's not there. So I think these two games will give us a really good sense of whether either one of these teams can make a run in the MAC tournament. And ultimately, record-wise, it could determine how successful their season is, whether it's a winning season or not. And there's some big games. St. Bonaventure plays at Davidson tonight. That's a pretty big game for their bubble hopes, and they're trying to win the Atlantic 10 regular season championship. They're tied for first place right now. UB has a home game against Central Michigan tomorrow after another big 28-point win last night. They're going to be playing at Ohio on Saturday. That's a big game for Ohio. So everybody's off pause and in action, and kind of we're getting to March. This is the last week of February, and it's going to be March Madness pretty soon.
Syracuse will not be making the tournament this year, unless we're
They
talking
could win
about
the ACC, but
the NIT. Oh yeah, they'd have to win the ACC, but they can't beat terrible Duke. Which is all right. So losing to Duke by 14 points in most years is okay. That happens, but Duke is not good this year. Syracuse.
Right, and Syracuse isn't very good either, but I wouldn't necessarily write them off. Syracuse has made runs to win back when they were in the Big East tournaments, when they were a lower seed. That zone, if they get hot shooting the ball and the way they play that zone defense, they overperform in postseason situations often. I don't really think they will. I don't think they have a good enough team this year to pull that off, but I wouldn't rule them out yet.
All right. Well, let's bring in Matthew Gutierrez. He covers Syracuse for The Athletic right after this on Tim Graham and Friends, brought to you by CTBK. Tim Graham and Friends is brought to you by CTBK, CPAs and business consultants. CTBK is a leading accounting firm with a growing team of accountants and business consultants with roots in Amherst, New York. CTBK pairs every project with a focus on a human connection between its team and the client. For assurance, accounting, taxes, litigation support, and advice on mergers and acquisitions, CTBK is available and ready to solve any issue your business faces. For a consultation or to request a quote, call 716-630-2400. Again, that's 716-630-2400. CTBK, over a quarter century of proven accounting and business excellence for Western New York and beyond. Joined now by Matthew Gutierrez. He covers Syracuse for The Athletic, both basketball and football. And we're going to get into what's going on with Jim Boeheim and his crew this year, what's not going on with them. And we're already looking towards next season when it comes to Syracuse basketball. Matthew, thanks for joining us.
Appreciate you guys for having me. Thank you. It's a blast. Always looking for recruiting at this point. Not always the case in late February here, but this is where we're at right now.
Yeah, this is the equivalent to a football writer of talking about the draft in November or December. Yeah, there's no playoffs to worry about. Although in college basketball, the industry has made it a point that everybody gets postseason or post-tournament action. I don't think that Syracuse is going to be in the, what are they? The CF, the CB, what are these, the Reggie Witherspoon old tournaments that they used to be in?
Not playing any of them this year.
What's that, Jonah?
They're not having those tournaments this year.
At all? Is there an NIT?
They'll NIT, yes.
Okay,
Yeah, I
so-
think Jonah's right. The others, yeah, no.
I think the NIT will be 8 teams in New York. I don't know if they've announced it yet, but I think it was John Feinstein said that's what it's going to be.
Does Syracuse qualify for that, Matthew?
Yeah, they probably will, I would imagine, unless they go in free fall here down the stretch. But yeah, absolutely. I think they're an NIT team. It'll be at the Garden coming up, in just a few weeks here. But yeah, on the outside looking in of the NCAA tournament on the bubble, seemingly every year since 2014, it's hashtag Bubbleville that has been the nicknames the past several years, coming off the the winningest stretch in program history was 09 to 2014. And since then, you had the NCAA sanctions and then just basically bubble team from here on out.
How much is that directly attributed to being in the ACC, do you think? I know it kind of coincides with it, but is that just coincidence?
I think it's partly for sure in the competition level. I think no doubt when you're playing Virginia and Florida State and North Carolina and even the Virginia Techs and NC States have proved to be a little bit of a challenge at times. Georgia Tech has given them fits, absolutely. I think something to be said there. The recruiting has gone up a little bit in the ACC. This is a down year for the conference, but Syracuse is facing better competition, and hence they're playing about 500 ball every year. Even the Sweet 16 team in 2016 was about 500 in league play. The Final Four team in 16, and then the Sweet 16 team 2 years later. They're floating in the middle of the pack, right? In the ACC, they beat up on the bottom half of the league, and they struggle with the top teams. That's pretty much the way it's going. It's really mostly a recruiting drop off has been the lead reason of that. Part of that's related to the sanctions. Part of that probably due to competition.
Do you think the future holds for, short and long term for Jim Boeheim? Obviously one of those college basketball coaches sort of entrenched in his job, but how many years does he have left? And, how has he handled this latest kind of dry spell for the program?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, Keys fans have talked about it after every loss, especially. You see the some of the fans who want him to go or just want to start thinking about a succession plan. Reality is, he's going to stay at Syracuse at least through Buddy's career. His son is a junior guard right now, one of the top scorers on the team the last 2 years, really can shoot the three well. He's been a little up and down this year. He had COVID himself, which really, set him back as a shooter, understandably would, and made him more fatigued. But yeah, I think Coach Boeheim stays for definitely Buddy's career, and the NCAA has given everyone an extra year. So you're looking at 2 additional seasons. That puts Jim Boeheim through at least 2023, which would be end of his 47th season at the helm of his alma mater. So you're approaching 50 there. He'd be almost 80 years old, but to his credit, he said he feels good. He's in good health. He's enjoying it. As far as the 500 play, he's certainly addressed it, and he basically says, "Look, I'd rather have a surprise Sweet 16 run, a surprise Final Four every decade or every few years, than go finish second or third in the ACC, but go out on the first weekend of the tournament." So that's how he's looked at it past few years. A lot of fans are frustrated with how norms have sort of, fallen off, right? I mean, this is a Syracuse team that used to be pretty much parked in the top 25 most of the winter. The past, really from 09 to 14, obviously a lot of successful stretches before that. But since then, they really haven't been a ranked team since 2014 consistently, which is, it's 7 years now, which is, it's hard to believe, but they don't quite have that national footprint I think they used to.
Matthew, let's dig into that for a little bit. I'm curious your thoughts as somebody who's based in Syracuse. You're a graduate. You wrote for the school paper. So it's you didn't just parachute in on this job. You know the history of the program. You know what Jim Boeheim means to the university, to the community. What's the dynamic like of a legend who people certainly respect for all that he's done, and yet there's this population, and I don't know if it's younger or if it's current students mostly or what, maybe you can break it down for us, of people who are ready to see him go. And I think that that's a phenomenon you get even with, I'm going to cross sports and go back a long way, but Chuck Noll with the Pittsburgh Steelers, the guy won 4 Super Bowls and fans were just ready for him to go. Tom Landry with the Cowboys, Marv Levy with the Bills, they were ready for him to go at some point. And I think that, there's probably some better and more recent examples of this. But here's Jim Boeheim, and you think, well, okay, who's going to replace him? I don't know. I'll just leave it at that. There's a question in there somewhere, but what's it like to see this evolve over time where people are just like, well, maybe it's time for a change?
For sure. I mean, really, I joke, with some friends who graduated with me, is that kind of ever since we were, started applying to Syracuse / got in mostly for the journalism school, they just haven't been the program they were, right? And it has coincided with the ACC, as you said. But yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, with any fan base, obviously there's a subset of fans who, are through and through with Coach Boeheim. They trust that he'll turn this around with a couple really strong recruiting classes, which obviously is certainly possible. And he could go out his last few seasons and on a bang, and maybe, another deep postseason run, no doubt about that. And then I think there is another subset of the population. I think it's a mix. It's younger people. I think it's people who have been around the program since the 70s and 80s who will even write, sometimes in comments off stories on our site or off tweets and Facebook posts and say, we're super appreciative for what he's done and building this program, literally building it basically from a small private school in upstate New York into a national brand, right? A team that has gone to a Final Four in every decade since the 70s. A team that's been ranked, that's produced dozens of NBA players, a handful of NBA All-Stars, and a team that's really, as far as compared to program norms, just fallen off a bit. It'd be interesting to see how it plays out long term, right? Is it a similar situation to UCLA, which obviously had a long stretch of winning, and then hasn't quite been at that level since really 2002. Looking bigger picture, and it's too early to tell for that. What Syracuse does have, though, is 51 straight winning seasons, which they just locked up again. They're 13-7. So even if they really struggle here down the stretch, they'll be all right. I mean, they still have that streak going for them. So some fans will point to that as a reason for optimism. They had their first 5-star recruit in Benny Williams from the Maryland area, usually rich of Syracuse talent over the years. Maryland, DC, Baltimore, of course, with Carmelo. And they have him coming in first 5-star in 7 years. So there's some hope there that they can build on Benny, what he brings, 6'8" forward, and try to have another class in 2022 that, some semblance of what the classes they used to get, are about a decade ago, where it was just routinely top 20, top 10 classes.
When it comes to recruiting, it seems like one way or the other, the one and done era is winding down, whether it's going to be a rule change with the NBA or more of these players going to the G League, overseas, interning at New Balance, whatever they do for that gap year in between high school and the pros. Do you think that helps Syracuse's recruiting position? Do you see them adjusting at all? They had Carmelo Anthony, probably the best one and done, and a few other good one and done freshman players. I think some schools are going to be helped by that and some will hurt. How do you think Syracuse fits into that mix?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know if it impacts them as much as some other programs. Obviously, it's a coincidence. Syracuse's one national championship came with, probably the best example of a one and done guy in Carmelo, and winning obviously a ton of awards and going for over 20 points a game, leading that team. As a freshman, first freshman to lead a national title team in scoring. So, it's funny how they have had Melo lead the title, but other than Carmelo, that really hasn't been a one and done shop like Duke, obviously Kentucky, even Carolina, to an extent. There's a couple other schools now that have, attracted 5-star guys and shipped them off right after a year. Syracuse has never, for the most part, had that as their formula. Coach Boeheim, even said last fall he's looking for guys who, after one of their best recruits in a while, decommitted, verbally, and Dior Johnson, who's from Syracuse, New York, an in-state kid. Once he decommitted, Boeheim made it very clear, look, we're looking for guys who want to stick around for 2 3 and even 4 years and develop in our program. We're not looking for guys who are thinking about the NBA and just want to, boost their draft stock when they're inside the program. So I don't think that trend hurts this team at all. Syracuse has its best teams. It's built around, not so much top 20 guys, but 4 stars players who, maybe are in the 80th in the class and overachieve and really develop at Syracuse. That's been their bread and butter on their good teams. I think Jeremy Grant's a perfect example. Wasn't, highly touted out of high school. I think he was like 80th in his class of 2012. Comes to Cuse as sort of secondary to a better recruit who didn't pan out as much. And then Jeremy had 2 really good years, and now he's a borderline all-star with the Pistons, making $20 million a year. So that's kind of the bread and butter for Cuse. It's those types of players who really develop over time. Don't know if the one and done impacts them as much, but they are going after some top guys in this next class here, 2022.
What is your sense about Dior Johnson? Because if he did come to Syracuse, I think he'd be the highest rated recruit they've had in a very long time, maybe since Melo. Buffalo was the first school to offer him back when he was an 8th grader. He's clearly probably beyond that level now, but I know you've written about him and talked to him. What is your sense on where he ends up?
Yeah, he is the best recruit since Carmelo. So you're looking at basically 20 years. I think he was born right around when Melo won the national championship at Cuse. And, there was a lot of optimism in what he was going to do. Obviously, he was going to be a 1-year guy in college. I think that's the consensus. I don't know where he ends up. He reopened his recruitment. I don't know if he goes straight pro. There's a number of opportunities now for guys just to hop out of high school and go play professionally, not necessarily in the NBA either. So he'll have obviously plenty of options. I know he's still being recruited by some programs. He's, posted about Louisville in recent weeks, and there's, rumors that he could still end up committing verbally at least to another high major program. So he's someone interesting to watch out for. On the other hand, I mean, look, he's been to, I think, 4 high schools now, 5 high schools. A lot of questions about that. An NBA scout had texted basically when he left Oak Hill Academy after not playing a single game. Oak Hill, also where Carmelo played, a number of other top guys, texted, quote, red flag when he saw that Dior had just left Oak Hill and obviously decommitted from Syracuse. So, questions about, his commitment might be warranted from some NBA teams, but undoubtedly a really talented player, just electric with the ball. Like you said, he piled up a ton of offers starting when he was 13, 14 years old and was a celebrity as a 10th grader in Kingston. So he's a guy who probably one of the better New York State talents in the past couple decades as far as his upside goes.
Matthew, what's your philosophy or your mindset when it comes to covering recruiting? Because you just mentioned, all those, a long list of twists and turns. That's just one player. And when you're at a program like covering a program like Syracuse, they go after players that are heavily covered as teenagers or 8th, before that, what's 8th grade? I guess you're still a teenager in 8th grade. I guess what's it like covering fickle kids and these parents? And I've done it on such a superficial level. It would drive me nuts. But it's such a focus of any major college programs, journalism. You need to do it. I guess what your thoughts on how you do it and still maintain your sanity?
Sure. I mean, recruiting is, obviously arguably the most important thing for a college coach. Obviously you want to develop and run practice drills and know how to manage a huddle, right, and manage issues within your team during the season. But I mean, you need players obviously to compete at a high level, and it's a little bit like the Wild West, obviously, with there are rules with what they can do, and COVID has obviously limited all in-person recruiting, but there's so much that changes with these guys and texts and obviously there's been plenty of scandal over time and violations, so you have that to deal with. But to your point, I mean, for the most part, it's not really the kids who are difficult to deal with. A lot of them are just trying to earn a scholarship and play the game they love, and there's a lot of great value in that, and I enjoy covering that part and talking to the kids about what they look forward to doing and what kind of schools they're interested in. It's really just like the people around them, whether it's high school coaches, AAU coaches, trainers, and Jay Billis has talked about it, plenty. But there's a lot of pressure, a lot of expectations on these guys. Start at this school, get this many minutes here, transfer if you don't play, you're going to the league in 2 years of college. There's a lot of pressure put on them, and I think it just creates extraordinary expectations that are really difficult to get met, and it can lead to disappointment, and frustration, and I don't think that's fair to the players. So absolutely love recruiting. Just some of the barriers, if you will, that end up popping up can make it a little bit of a hassle, but it's incredibly important for programs to recruit at a high level to play well.
Can I ask you about one recruit that I know you did at least some reporting on? Roddy Gale from Niagara Falls. He's committed to Ohio State. Syracuse was in his top 5, maybe even his top 2 when he made that decision. Just from the people you talked to, what do you think about him as a prospect if he was to have come to Syracuse, and where he ends up playing?
Yeah, he was certainly on Syracuse's radar. He was really a guy they wanted. Obviously, the New York State kid. They sold him on being sort of the next Johnny Flynn from that area, another really talented PG who, as a lot of people in the NBA will remind you, went ahead of Steph Curry in the I think it was the 09 or what was it, 10 draft, 09. So I think Roddy's an excellent player. Had spoken with him last summer when Syracuse was really trying to get a commitment from him. He talented player. I think Ohio State is having an outstanding season, by the way. I think he's going to a program that seemingly is on the upswing here, and I think he saw that, right? He saw a program that's not far from home that meant a lot to him, he said, and I think he picked, he made a really good choice for a great coach and again a program that's by far not just a football school. With Roddy, Jerry McNamara was really recruiting him hard. I think texting him early in the morning, can't wait to work out with you at this time, and it just didn't end up working out. And he didn't explain exactly why not Syracuse, but he felt, I think, Ohio State was just where he envisioned himself, and I think that staff did a really good job in recruiting him.
What would push me to Ohio State is if Ohio State's assistant coaches were texting me at like 3 p.m. and saying, looking forward to working out with you at this time. And then I'd say, all right, I'm going to Ohio State. Yeah, and that early morning text about working out might have backfired.
Could have, right? You never know. I mean, sometimes you don't know what impacts these kids, right? Some guys obviously like to get in late at night and get some shots up. It could be. Jerry's I've worked really hard on trying to recruit, and I think there's no question the staff has dealt with, obviously the sanctions limited how many could be on the road recruiting, and then also the number of recruits they could land and scholarship count. So, they've had a couple barriers there. Those are behind them though right now. And so right now they're certainly facing an uphill battle. But, as far as Roddy goes, I don't think that's a huge quote unquote miss for Syracuse. Really, they need to land it's obvious, right? They need to land a legit Power 5 center, right? At this point, Coach Boeheim has even said last year on ESPN Rochester, quote, "I've done a bad job recruiting big men." And it's clear, right? They just don't have that strength inside on the backside of the zone. You look at any good Syracuse team, they had a rim protector. Right now they don't. That's another lead reason for being 500 in league play. So, while Roddy's a really talented player, he's not a miss at all. I think for Cuse, they need some big guys inside.
Matthew Gutierrez has covered golf also, and I'd like to ask him about Tiger Woods. But before we get to that, I want to make sure with Matt Fairburn or Jonah, any more basketball questions? I don't want to.
Yeah, I had one more.
Sure.
Buffalo had played at Syracuse earlier in the year, and there were some comments coming out of that game from Jim Boeheim. Wasn't happy with the way that game finished. Some of the things that were said by Buffalo players, Buffalo bench. I don't know who specifically, but my question is, he had indicated that Syracuse might be done playing Buffalo, that the way that game ended left a sour taste in Boeheim's mouth. I read that as Boeheim whining as he is wont to do. What do you take from those comments? Do you think maybe that series is going to end because of how that game played out?
Yeah, long-standing series, no doubt. I mean, it makes a no-brainer, right? Drive on Route 90 and play some basketball in November or December. Obviously, with Coach Oates, I think it was 2-3 years ago, upset in the Dome. Arguably Buffalo was the best team in New York State that year, and probably was. And look what he's doing now at Alabama, top 10 program. I mean, the guy's just winning. But yeah, I take Coach Bam's comments to be exactly that. I don't know if Buffalo will play Syracuse, at least in Boeheim's tenure, whether that's 2 more years or 5 more years. It could be the latter. So yeah, I think he did not like that Buffalo was talking smack throughout that game. Buffalo, by the way, had an outstanding first half, and that game scored, I think, almost 50 points against the zone. Really, it was Buffalo's game to lose there, and they ended up not finishing it out there. I thought they were the better team in that game as sitting courtside. But yeah, a lot of trash talk throughout that game. I didn't think it was excessive at all. I thought it was, definitely above average, but I don't think it was no one crossed the line or anything. And so I think, Boeheim probably felt, between a couple close games, you lost to Buffalo, maybe, it's not worth bringing them back when you can, beat a Cornell or Niagara. I don't know. Maybe that's the thought process there. I didn't see it being excessive at all at any point.
A convenient excuse, perhaps, Matthew?
Could be, absolutely. I mean, Buffalo was giving Cuse fits quite a bit, even in the couple losses. I think that they were not your usual Syracuse rollover, Cornell and St. Bonaventure, and sometimes or Colgate, not a team of that caliber.
Then get Niagara and Canisius in there. They'll take those games.
Sure. And the athletic department won't mind too, with some, 100, 200 grand coming in.
All right. So Tiger Woods and his accident yesterday, and we're still learning as we're recording this right now on Wednesday. Really, everything that Tiger Woods has gone through. The latest is that he's, well, when they're reporting that he's awake and responsive, it leads me to wonder what we don't know yet, because to say that a guy who's had a couple of leg surgeries is awake and responsive seems to me, I don't know if it's overkill in terms of the coverage, but maybe there's some more issues that we don't know about. Anyways, I don't want to get into what we don't know about, but as somebody who's covered golf, and Tiger Woods in many ways is larger than golf, how were you following the news yesterday with his single car accident?
Sure. I mean, well, first of all, our lead golf writer, Brendan Quinn, who also covers Michigan and Michigan State, I thought did a good job touching on it, and he did a little bit of a look back to the 2009 accident Tiger had, obviously under completely different circumstances, we think. But drawing some parallels and contextualizing it a little bit. So I thought that was a good piece to check out for people. But yeah, as far as, what I thought of immediately was, thankfully he's alive and no one else got hurt, right? I mean, to cross another, to cross the other lane and then go several hundred feet off the road, I think it was, obviously is concerning, and thankfully, again, no one was coming the other way. I think someone had said, I believe in the police department there, I read somewhere that, thankfully he's alive, and basically wearing his seatbelt saved him. So I think just starting there, that was my first thought, right? I mean, he's lived what seems to be a really bad accident, especially the way the car looked in those images. I mean, it was striking. You're glad it looks like just leg related, lower half injuries, which doesn't mean life threatening. So if you're looking for a positive there, right, it's that he's alive, no one else got hurt coming the other way. I think that's the best view at this point. And then just looking to see, obviously a top 5 name in sports, in comparison, top 3 even right now. I mean, everyone knows Tiger, one word. How much he means. You saw the support that came out from the golf world and celebrities elsewhere on social there. So I think it just speaks to the sheer volume and popularity he has and the weight his name holds. So, thankfully he seems to be at least hanging in.
How many times have you covered Tiger, would you say, or been in situations at tournaments or even superficially? I had, I guess it's an honor to have covered it. I don't know. Maybe I don't want to go overboard with it, but I covered his first PGA win. It happened to be in Las Vegas when I was in Las Vegas, and my job for that tournament was to follow Tiger around because our golf writer was writing about the tournament. And here's this young kid out of Stanford. And it's like, Tim, you got the sidebar duty, which was really the headlining duty. And I covered John Daly for the first round, which was a treat. But then I covered Tiger for the rest of it. And so I'll always look back on that as a pretty cool moment because he is larger than life. So even when you cover, as ancillary as my assignment was, I mean, that's one I'll remember.
For sure. It's something I remember as well. I think I've only been at 2 events where he was. I focused mostly on LPGA last year, but a couple summers ago, he was at Shinnecock Hills on Long Island in the 2018 US Open. So I covered him there. I ended up writing a story about him, I think on the second or third day. Obviously, pretty much in any major, right? Your outlet's probably going to write about Tiger and Phil. And I just remember the crowds for him, man. I mean, he wasn't even in contention really. And, 4 or 5 deep everywhere he went, past the lines and the ropes. So he was revered, even though I don't think he was remotely in contention or even playing great. I think he was doing okay. But yeah, the classic getting the whole screams after, he tees off on a par 5 and, just a lot of people there to cheer on someone they either grew up watching or just grew to, fell in love with the game, maybe because of him. And there was definitely plenty of that throughout the whole week. I mean, the draw, he at times was drawing more fans than the leaders were, and that just, again, speaks to, the player he has been.
What do you notice about, particularly on a day like yesterday, find it interesting, the impact he's had on this generation of golfer, of guys that are, in their 20s and probably not necessarily, they weren't of age to appreciate necessarily what he was doing at the time, but he still seems to have made an impact on them. And you see it with guys like Justin Thomas and just like the emotional reactions that you see. What did you make of seeing some of that trickle through in the golf world yesterday?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it speaks to what he's done. I mean, there's guys he's playing with now that are playing in some cases because of him or strove to work hard and be a pro and aspire for that, because of him, because they watched him. It's obviously full circle in many ways with a lot of these elite players, who followed him. I even remember, not about me, but I think it was like probably 2nd or 3rd grade summer camps, golf camps, and they would, at Classic show us, tapes of Tiger coming back and on Sundays and the roar of the crowds. I think, Pebble Beach was probably one of the top clips in those. And so, just having watched the Tiger documentary, I don't know if you all got to see it just a few weeks ago that came out. Was it HBO or Showtime, one of those, right? And, a lot of those clips get played, and it's as repeat as they can be and as, cliche as they sometimes show up. It's, he's transformed, the game obviously, and brought a whole new audience to the sport. What
non-Tiger golf storylines are you interested in following this summer? I'm sure you've had a chance to more chance to think about it than you would during a more competitive basketball season, but LPGA or PGA, what golf storylines are hooking you so far?
Yeah, I mean, you guys know, right? It's pretty nice out today, and I'm hoping March is next week, and maybe we can.
You're in Syracuse, right?
Yep.
It's nice out today, is it?
It was like 45 out today here in Buffalo. Sunny.
It's
I need
not
to
10.
poke my head out. I do hear things melting off my house. Yes. I'm more concerned with this basement issue, which is
It's 52 degrees.
Matthew doesn't know about it, but my basement issue. I'm not happy with this warming weather. I'm going to be clearing water out of my basement. I'm sorry, Jonah, you were saying?
No, I just say 52 degrees out right now.
52?
When we're recording this.
T-shirt weather.
Yeah, I
Golf
guess I'm
weather.
going to have to go rake leaves.
Yeah, so I'm certainly thinking about it. I think some people are, at least around here, trying to get out next month and play if the snow fully melts and of course isn't a swamp. But yeah, I mean, as far as this year, I love the LPGA because it doesn't get the ton of media coverage, and you can talk to players one-on-one during a major, and I think those golfers probably don't get as much respect as they may deserve. I mean, the women, they can still crush the ball. They play really well, and there's some outstanding athletes on that tour, and I think there are a number of you could go down the list, right? There's so much talent. Anyone can really win in a lot of these majors, and so much young talent too. But as far as the men's side go, I mean, obviously Bryson's a good story and someone interesting to follow. I was interested to see how Tiger was going to be able to come back from a fifth back surgery. I think he had surgery right around Christmas time, so he was still obviously in pretty much recovery mode. I don't think he was going to participate in the Masters. It didn't seem that way, but I was looking forward to seeing him in the summer. Obviously, we don't know what his situation will be this year. Golf fans hoping for the best for him. Another seemingly lower half issue. He's had his fair share of golf related knee problems as well. So as far as Bryson, I mean, Justin Thomas is an exciting player as well. There's you go down the list, man, and that's I'm just excited to see some sun and hopefully get out to an event this year. I got to persuade my editors. Maybe I can get to one this summer.
Yeah, I don't. Just to touch back on Tiger again. Maybe I don't know if it's reckless of me to say this, and I've already mentioned it. So maybe I shouldn't. But as journalists, 4 journalists on this call, I do circle back to the wording that's being used in regard to covering this. And I'm torn between whether or not it's just because it's Tiger and everybody's covering every little grain of what's going on here. But it seems as though some of the things that people are getting making it a point to report seems to think that if you are covering this, maybe there's some things that are known within the golfing community or people who are on the scene, but they're not quite reporting yet as to how bad this is. Because again, to say that the guy's responsive after having a couple leg surgeries, you would think, well, no shit. But
the reporters aren't in the hospital, so they can only report what is being fed to them. I would question whether.
Well, even the doctors are saying he's alert. He's, how this is good news. He's responsive. We're like, well, I didn't know. Was I supposed to be worried about whether he wasn't going to be when he, that's the thing as a journalist where my radar is up. And again, maybe it's reckless of me to say. So Jonah, it's good for you to put me back in my place.
I think people see the car, they see the car, they see it's Tiger Woods. I don't know. It's almost a year after Kobe. It just triggers a lot of those types of feelings for people when you see a guy with that name and you see the shape the car was in. But it does, I think it was an illuminating journalism day in general, seeing the way cable news kind of, the information that's coming out in bits and pieces and, some of the way it's covered. Twitter and cable news not built for serious car crashes, frankly. I think one of those things where we need the information very well, people, because of who he is, because of the past that he has, want to draw lines and assume some things, but we just don't know. And I think I was interested in the level of detail in the statement from Tiger Woods camp, because I think that was helpful, because there are a lot of people, like you said, Tim, that may take a wording or a phrase and say, wait, he's responsive, what's going on? Is he going to need, to just get real detail.
That's why I hope it's overkill. I hope it's just people. I hope it's
oversharing.
I hope
And
that's the case.
hopefully, yeah. We don't know. We'll see what, comes out and, if they're able to get any more details. But, I think not the best event for the modern day Twitter cable news machine that we
Even
have.
official words were wrong. The LA, I believe it was the LA Sheriff's Department, came out with the very first statement in which it mentioned the jaws of life were used. And then the fire department came back later, hours later, and said, no, the jaws of life weren't used. It was a normal extraction. And that's a big piece of news. When you hear jaws of life, that casts a certain feeling or a tone over the whole thing. And then it's like, no, he was just extract. So anyways, even the official words have been not too reliable, but clearly an icon's icon in the sporting world. And hopefully it is just being overcovered, which is, I guess, good, right? I mean, more journalism, I don't know.
In a manner of speaking.
Matthew, you're the
being
guest.
covered.
Your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I mean, no. To Matthew's point, I just think the images were striking, right? To see that car in just a wrecked situation, and to see it having crossed the median and crossed another lane, basically it looked like somewhat of a. I'm not familiar with the area, but a semi-highway, or at least an area that you would think could have a lot of cars.
It was 4 lanes, so it was
Right.
built up to handle 2 lanes of traffic going each direction.
Yeah.
Which
LA,
in Southern California, though, because everything is relatively new, could be a gated community with, that gets a car every 15 minutes. But it didn't seem that way.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I just again the pictures though, I think could lead one to assume or project something really horrible had happened or there was foul play involved. But I think that would be premature. At this point, we just don't know what the deal was.
And I think 4 of us on this call, or maybe I'm sure we probably have, I've covered car accidents before. I used to be a news side reporter briefly, and I used to have to go out and cover accidents and fires and things. And I'm speaking for myself, but my guess is for all 4 of us, I'm thankful that I don't have to chase down stories like this, because as the information's flying, and especially on somebody so famous, everybody hanging on every little word, as I'm proof of throughout this podcast, mentioning the wording and the vernacular that's being used. That's a high wire act to have to cover that and not get anything wrong. And you're probing into people's private lives and what do you deserve to know? What don't you deserve to know? And this is why I got into sports journalism.
Hey, I mean, 2 years ago, Jim Boeheim got into an accident where,
right.
Someone died as a result of it, and there was no wrongdoing ruled in the accident on Boeheim's part, and there was just a lot of assumptions in that case. Obviously, he's not anywhere near Tiger Woods on a global scale, but in the community, he's obviously the most, probably the most famous person in Central New York, and he, there were a lot of guesses. Was he drinking? Was it this? Was he texting? He doesn't drink alcohol. And, I think they said he definitely wasn't texting. There was, again, no wrongdoing. And so even now you'll see on Twitter, Jim Boeheim killed the guy, pretty much almost every day from other teams or I think I even just saw it Monday during the Duke game in big numbers too. And so you see a lot of, to your point earlier on Twitter, not being ideal in some ways. And that's certainly a situation where you just sometimes wish you didn't even have to deal with the Twitter part of it.
Yeah. Well, Matthew, thanks for doing this. Anything you want to add that we didn't ask you about?
No, I'm looking forward to, things reopening maybe this summer and getting out to Buffalo. I wanted to check out Letchworth. I know that's somewhat close, not really, maybe. So if you have any good food recommendations, definitely.
Once you get to Buffalo, out
Slack.
there, out by Letchworth, I can't tell you. I've never been, and it's a regret of mine. I need to get out there because every time I see pictures of it, I'm like, that's exactly where I'd want to be. But then the drive is just long enough that I get, I find something else to do with my day. but yeah, get out here. Let's have a couple of beers, stay overnight so you don't have to drive back to Syracuse. And we'll take you to a couple of the wing joints or the WEC places. And we'll show you around Western New York. Yeah, get some golf in. Matt's a huge golf. Oh, let me also make it a point, since we mentioned it before we came on. I did call Matthew Gutierrez Matt by accident, which I thought I might do because of Matt Fairburn being on here. Matthew goes by Matthew, and other Matthew goes by Matthew. And I just want to put out a blanket apology to Matthew Fairburn for all the times that I call him Matt. I've never checked with him and to see if he could be incredibly offended by the fact that I call him Matt. He's never had the balls to stand up to me about it. So right now is your chance. Am I wrong to call you Matt?
I've been called a lot worse, so I'm fine with. I'm fine.
He's been too polite to put me in my place.
I go by it professionally because I assume my mother would appreciate it, but I don't. People call me all sorts of things, so I just kind of roll with it.
I call you MF.
Should I call you Matthew from now on? Let's go ahead and put this to rest.
Sure.
Do I continue to call you Matt or do I call you Matthew?
Unless there's a more impressive Matthew on the show, then Matthew belongs to the power rankings. Matthew
I see. So you want to be Matthew?
Matt is fine. I mean, it doesn't really matter. I've been Matt. I've been.
No, but you just said you want Matthew.
Sure.
Okay. Well, see now, so how long have we known each other? And I've been calling you Matt for 5 years, and you prefer Matthew. This is like when Stephen Hauschka didn't want to correct anybody when they were spelling his name wrong, or Keenan McArdell when he went by McCardle for 15 years, and then finally somebody interviewed his dad, and he was like, "Oh, by the way, his name is McArdell." And then they went and talked to him, be like, "Hey, you've been in the NFL, you've led the league in receptions," and he's like, "I'm just happy to be in the league, man."
That's kind of how I feel. I'm just happy to be here.
Hockey players. I mean, I did a whole story on it with all the Sabres who went by mispronounced names because they didn't want to correct anybody. All right, Matthew, 2 Matthews. See, we got to the bottom. Matthew Gutierrez being on this show has solved a rift that I didn't even know existed.
We're all better for it.
Matthew G, thank you. Thank you for your service and for your thoughts on Syracuse and golf.
Appreciate you guys. Let's do it again, maybe down the road here.
I'd like that. Matthew Gutierrez from The Athletic, covering Syracuse, covering golf, all around problem solver.